Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hacking Your Organization. Ethical hackers show how easy it is to take over your network, presented by Envision Technology Advisors and KLR. My name is Jeremy Gerard. I'm the Director of Marketing for Envision, and I'm playing the role of host today. I get the privilege to be joined by some incredibly intelligent minds on this topic. It's a great topic as part of October's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And kicking us off here is actually the Director of Information Security for our sister company, KLR, Dan Andrea. He's going to get us started and kind of set the stage for the topic we're going to talk about today. Dan, thank you very much for joining us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this topic and why it is so important in the conversations that you're out there having?
Well, excellent. Thank you very much, Jeremy, and thank you everyone for joining us. Hopefully the next hour will be enlightening to you. Hopefully the folks you see across your screen won't scare you too much, but we wanted to cover a topic that we believed maybe doesn't get enough attention from a cybersecurity do's and don'ts bit. As Jeremy alluded to, my name is Dan Andrea. I head up our IT assurance services at KLR. My group is responsible basically for auditing organizations' cybersecurity posture and looks for some of the things that you're about to see this afternoon. Just to set the stage, again, we're smack dab in the middle of Cybersecurity Month. No doubt some of you are probably suffering a little cyber fatigue. That's okay, it's allowed. And again, we're going to try to sexy it up simply because I think what the boys are going to show you is kind of interesting stuff. We all know the importance of security, IT security, and data security, and physical and non-physical asset security in our organization. God knows there's regulations everywhere, whether it's a state, federal, international level, that needs everyone to have their ducks in order. But cyber isn't necessarily a technical issue only. It's a business issue. It's a compliance issue. No doubt many of you watching right now are serving a governance role within your organization, or may even be serving a governance role in other organizations. Hopefully you'll be able to take something out of this and start to elevate those discussions. Just imagine if you're sitting on the board of a tax-exempt organization and you're responsible for the preservation of security of all those donor or member records. I think what you're about to see this morning is going to be kind of enlightening. With that, I am going to turn it over to Jason, who's going to talk about ethical hacking. That's the sort of the thrust of our presentation. And what is ethical hacking? It's basically authorizing Jason and his crew to come in and try to penetrate your system. That's it in its simplest form. The boys will go into it in a lot more detail, but that's it in its simplest form. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Jason and the bad guys, but I guess they're good guys today because they're on the ethical hacking side. And with that, Jason, take it away.
Absolutely, and thanks, Dan. I appreciate your time here and the overview. It was a wonderful overview. Jeremy, thank you so much for the lead-in. For folks who are attending today, please feel free, if you have any questions throughout our presentation, throw them in the chat. We will gather those and we'll make sure we address them toward the end. But as Dan mentioned, you know, today's cyber landscape and digital landscape is so complicated. The bad guys are getting more sophisticated. Businesses need to react and think fast. If you look at just some stats, by June of this year, our US economy was hit with $350 million worth of ransom payments alone, just the US economy. You know, we are in the middle of a cybersecurity war. It's a cyber war out there. It's shocking our economy. It's a national security issue. It's hitting critical infrastructure, schools, governments, hospitals, nonprofits. Look at the Colonial Pipeline. There were 17 states, because of that digital attack that affected our physical lives, that went into a state of emergency. 17 states because of the shortage of gas. Every organization, no matter your vertical, your size, your location, you're in the crosshairs these days. You know, threat actors are not the folks you see in some of these ads that are in hoodies, ski masks, sitting in a dungeon. attacking your organization. You know, folks in the cybersecurity world, the professionals who do this on the day-to-day, we actually poke fun at that. You know, those are organizations who are looking at leveraging fear, uncertainty, and doubt to scare you to buy a tool or a piece of software. We're not dealing with people in hoodies and masks. We're dealing with folks who don't have any ethics, who don't have conscience. We're dealing with criminals who want to make money. We're in a position today where it's syndicated, it's organized crime. We're calling it cyber cartels. They're operating in the modern black market, selling tools, selling access, selling ransomware to hold your organization hostage, blackmailing your organization, and selling your data. These are the effects of those cartels and those cyber criminals. While most businesses are aware of the business risk and the cyber risk that is presented today, unfortunately, most organizations, they're still working from a reactive approach. If you go back in early June, you may have seen Secretary Mayorkas from the DHS on Nightline. He said blatantly on Nightline, cybersecurity is no longer an elective. It's not a choice of should I increase my cybersecurity for me, for my business, for my life. It's a must. It's an imperative. And then he later talked about the vulnerability that one has is not only a threat to oneself, it's a threat to everyone to whom they are connected. So take that into context. It's a threat to you personally, it's a threat to your organization, but it may also be a threat to your clients, your customers, your partners, anybody that you're connected with. Now, in order to achieve success here, you know, we need teams with those same capabilities, those skill sets, those mindsets, who can continuously assess the current state of organizations and their security posture, their risk posture as a business. We need hackers. We need hackers with ethics. We need hackers who are motivated to protect, who stay on that bleeding edge of technology every day in that global threat intelligence landscape, so they know what's happening out there. I look at them and I look at this team that you're about to see as the superhero hackers. They use their skills for greater good. They want to help our clients stay safe. They provide those services that will ultimately help protect our customers from those dangers we just talked about, those constantly emerging threats. And they're the ones who are going to help you respond effectively if unfortunately that day ever comes where you suffer a cyber incident. These are the folks responding, making sure they can contain the issue and protect your information to the best of their ability. So that being said, I want to introduce you to a couple of hackers. I want to introduce you to Manny Lobeo and Emilio Texera. Manny, why don't you give a little bit of background on yourself?
Absolutely. You know, thanks everybody for attending today. Always excited to talk about security, and I promise to try not to ramble too much. I'll try to keep it within the time frame. So my name is, again, Manny Lobeo, Senior Manager of Information Security for Envision Technology Advisors. I have 20+ years of overall IT experience, including business analyst experience mixed in, and for the past seven+ years, really heavily focused on security. So it gives me a really rounded view from a technology used today, how your organization would leverage it, and how we as ethical hackers would get to your information, and ultimately, and most importantly, how we can help you stop people just like us.
Emilio.
Hey everybody, I'm Emilio Texera. Thanks for your time today. I'm 28 years old, Cape Verdean from Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Have over 10 years experience in IT. Started at the help desk at URI, have a pretty good background in networking, IT networking, and about 5 years dedicated to security, including network security and ethical hacking. Security engineer for Envision Technologies, and at night I like to call myself Batman.
That's awesome. So just so you guys can see, these are hackers, right? But these are the good guys. Just like out there, there's good Emilios and bad Emilios. There's good Mannies and bad Mannies, right? Hackers these days are folks who are sitting in a Starbucks, but they're criminals. These folks are sitting within our four walls, and they're the superheroes helping you fight that crime. We're modern day superheroes fighting crime. But again, they're not the hackers who are ultimately trying to expose you. They have a mission. And the mission of our team is to leave our customers better off than we found them with every experience, every project, every interaction that we have. It's not fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It is technical talent, business talent, process talent to allow you to become more resilient. And ultimately, our job is to know our enemies, right? That's the research that we do on a daily basis. And we have frameworks and techniques and tactics that we use as ethical hackers, as folks who are in your environment hunting those criminals and defending against attacks and organized crime. You can see here that there are stages of attacks, phases of attacks, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Some of them are months worth of time that a cyber criminal would spend within your organization profiling you. Some are seconds worth of tools that you can buy on the internet in a black market to deliver on an outcome that they're trying to achieve. An active breach can be active for months without anybody knowing that you're within an organization hunting around. Our goal is to use these techniques and phases and stages so that we can emulate what an attacker would do. We can model that behavior. We can decipher patterns, and we can help you enable your defenses and your tools that we want to put in place to better secure your organization. So these are the frameworks we use on a daily basis, techniques that we're going to use on a daily basis. And really throughout this, we're going to start by showing you how hackers operate, the mindset of a hacker, the known tactics, techniques, and procedures that they're using. And we're actually going to tell you some stories of engagements, projects, incident response activities that we've gone through over the course of the last years with customers, and how hackers have been able to evade systems, how we've been able to help organizations secure their systems by showing vulnerabilities within their organization, and really create that baseline and that knowledge base of what we need to leverage from a technical, a people, a process, and a best practice perspective to make our clients more successful, more resilient. So we're going to kick it off. We're going to start this conversation, get into the mindset of our ethical hackers here. So Manny, I'm going to start with you. It sounds like a lot. We went through a lot here. And many organizations sit back and say, you know what, I'm probably not a target. I'm a small to medium-sized business. I don't have really any information that a global criminal ring would want. Where do malactors begin? How do they start that process of identifying who they're going to attack, why they're going to attack them, and how they're going to take advantage of businesses?
Absolutely. This is when we're going to get into our kind of first phase of the process. We're going to get into our reconnaissance phase onto the next slide here. So we have this is part of our overall preparation. This is the portion of this process that can take weeks and months. This is where we do a lot of our information gathering. We're going to get an understanding of really what the intel is around our potential target. We're looking at recruitment information, public records, a lot of the same tools and techniques that you would see maybe a private investigator use or a detective utilize are the same information and techniques that are available for hackers as well. The whole purpose of this is to identify an organization that has data or content that we as a malicious actor is trying to get a hold of and or exploit in some way. This entire first step is all about setting up the attack. We need to get a map, a game plan of what we're going to be facing in the future. All of this is happening externally. You're not going to see this. Nobody's accessing your systems. Nobody's trying to do anything yet. This is all information gathering on ancillary systems around there. There are automated tools that can take a look at your edge assets, any of the assets that you have exposed to the internet. Also, we're looking for opportunities of any exploitable systems that may be available. The possibility of doing something as simple as password guessing, common password credentials that may be utilized to later on come to fruition. We're utilizing common platforms like social media to identify relationships, is to identify who are the executive leaders of an organization, who are their relationships within the business, and where are the third-party relationships that exist business to business, first-party to third-party relationships. All of those come into play because while we may be looking at an individual organization as a starting point, they may not be the ultimate goal. That organization may be just a point of entry to a much larger organization that we're trying to gain access into. So based on that relationship, you could easily get pulled into a larger attack scheme based on just a relationship that you have with other organizations or personnel. And then we're going to dive into what we call the dark web. So the dark web is when we get into places where malicious actors, criminals, go to sell their goods. These are places where you can go and identify breach databases. These were information that was breached previously from a particular organization, a client or group. And there are some cases where if you're going to get information from a client, you may not have to even go to the point of going and breaching it if it's already been done. You can, in many cases, purchase this information or gather this information individually ahead of time. Additionally, they can sell account access. So if an organization has been breached by a malactor before, they can maintain persistence and actually resell access over the dark web so that you don't have to re-breach or re-go and perform all these activities all over again. And then ultimately, there are also tools that you can purchase. As we start to get our landscape together, we start building our toolbox. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But what comes to mind is Emilio. I remember there was this automotive industry client that we had worked on. I think you had found something interesting.
Yeah, it was actually funny. Sometimes it's hard to think, what do we do? Most of the time, I'd say I spend my time doing reconnaissance. I've been in Vision for a couple of months now, and I think I'm still doing reconnaissance for some of our clients. But it was the first week that I was looking at this automotive repair company, one of our clients, and I noticed that we were hosting one of their web applications, and it was for their content management system. It was built all in-house, and it was completely out of date. I know some of the other engineers were telling me that they were trying to get them to update their application with no luck. But I spent a couple hours, probably 2 to 3 hours, just poking around the website, and I ended up finding some open directories. And within those open directories, there were plain text credentials for one of their Outlook mailboxes, and the inbox happened to be for their accounts receivable and accounts payable. So I had access to all kind of POs, PDF files, and other emails. I had access to email lists, the global address list. So basically just by spending all of that time looking around, I was able to basically bypass the rest of these steps that we were about to go to just to get to the end goal without doing much work. So it goes to show, if you do your reconnaissance well, you save yourself a lot of time and effort. So when we talk about how can we prevent or how can we help our business from minimizing our exposure, we want to think non-technical. All of this information is public information that's out there. Anybody can Google it. Anybody can go to your website. We can poke around, but it's more thinking about outside of the box, right? On your website, you might have an entire email address list that I can use to my advantage. Some of these things we might overthink, but it's really just thinking outside of the box and non-technical. So think your online hygiene, your social media, your websites, your digital footprint. And you also want to talk to your employees. For example, this is the accounts receivable and accounts payable mailbox. Some of those sales team and the accounting team, they're targets. So you're going to want to make sure that they're going to be able to identify any of these malicious links or phishing attempts, or making sure that their footprint is kind of minimalized. That way the impact is less for your business when people are out there trying to scour the internet for your information.
Awesome. No, that's great. And I love this story simply because it shows the law of unintended consequences. We were out doing reconnaissance. We found some threat vectors for one of our customers. And immediately, you want to talk about a response, immediately we're able to work with our engineering team and our customers to remediate that. And it was the law of unintended consequences. We're out doing reconnaissance for other methods, other things, and we stumble upon a threat vector, and then we raise our hand, right, like professionals and superheroes do, and we help remediate that quickly. So that's an awesome story. Thanks for sharing that. So just to
Jason, can I just jump in?
Absolutely, Dan.
Just to emphasize what Emilio said, we've seen clients that you can tell their whole life story based upon their bios on the websites.
Yes.
And you may be trying to impress someone poking around your website, but gosh, be careful, because these guys can use that to their advantage.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And that's actually a good lead-in, right? Because once you have gathered all of this information, the goal of a malactor, and for us as the superheroes trying to mimic that and show vulnerabilities within organizations, is to weaponize that information, right? So I'm going to kick it over and let Emilio kind of keep going here. But once you gather all that info, once you're online, gathering social information, looking at pictures that people are putting up on Instagram or Facebook, going into the dark web, gathering information there, what are you doing with it? Once you've gathered all of that intel, How are you using it?
So we're still in this preparation phase, right? We're still not in our attack phase yet. So we're still we're reviewing, we're preparing for our attacks. We're still in the weeks to months time frame. So we're looking at everything we grabbed, whether from our reconnaissance phase, right? Whether it's IP addresses, your assets on discovering your websites, scraping usernames, emails, looking at your social media. We're even looking at, we're watching the news. We're looking at what's going on with your business. Are you going through any mergers and acquisitions? Who are you working with? So we're kind of formulating this attack plan, right? We have all these Lego pieces, and we're trying to figure out where do these pieces fit in, right? So you have your email portal that's out there on the internet. I know from an attacker standpoint that I can take all of the email addresses and start to formulate an attack plan on your email portal. I have your usernames. I can point that towards your VPN portals and start to brute force attack that. So basically, I'm trying to put these pieces together and figure out what the best way to attack your business is. And also, we're going back in the lab and we're building these tools. We're building custom tools. We're staging them. We're testing them. We're excuse me. We're basically building this attack toolbox, right? We're trying to build a shed, right? And so we know, I know I'm going to need a hammer. I know I'm going to need a few nails. I know I'm going to need a drill, right? So we're trying to decide what the best way is to kind of attack your business for the industry that you're in. So we're choosing our target based on the assets that you have, and we're also prioritizing them by their highest risk, right? So we know if your VPN portal doesn't have two-factor enabled, but your email portal does, I'm gonna probably choose your VPN portal to attack first, right? If we're looking at our vulnerability scans and we see that there's a remote executable code, a remotely exploitable vulnerability, I'm gonna probably choose that first too. I'm gonna try to minimize my time and effort, right? So and another thing that more sophisticated or nation state attackers are doing, they're buying tools and they're buying services from sophisticated hackers, right? They're buying their time and saying, hey, I have a target in mind. I need you to brute force their email portal. How much do I have to pay you to do that, right? We're going to the black market. We're on the dark web. We're looking for potential exploits that are already available prepackaged for sale, right? So basically, there's this whole network of hackers who are ready to monetize their services. So that's what we're doing in this phase. We're basically coming up with a game plan. And I'm gonna kick it over to you, Manny. If you want to add anything or have any interesting stories you can tell about this phase.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then just like you said, Emilio, it's all about building that toolbox, right? We're gathering information so that we can create essentially a weapon that can go out and can get around based on what we're able to find out about your infrastructure. So something that comes to mind is that we had a manufacturing organization, and not too long ago, we had quite a large webmail exploit that was going around for Microsoft. And it was something that, because webmail tends to be externally facing, there was a high threat vector associated with it. A lot of people were really going out and trying to find access into these. We had one of our manufacturing clients come to us and say, you know what, something's not quite right. We want you to take a look at something and tell us if we're in trouble or not. And essentially, we jumped into our incident response planning. At that point, with our incident response team, we're going in and we're doing into 3 phases. We're going into containment, remediation, and then forensic auditing. We're going to go ahead and contain the outbreak if there is one. We're going to remediate across to make sure there's no persistence, something that you'll find as we talk a little bit further is highly important as well. And then ultimately is forensic auditing to determine what was the root cause, what in all activities, if any, had taken place in the environment, so you have a full understanding of what took place in the organization. So in this instance, the webmail client for the portal was run against, a popular exploit was run against it. And it had actually run through most of the steps. And there was one key thing, and this really comes to this idea of reconnaissance and weaponizing the platform, is that it had to make a call to an email box that expressly existed. So I had to name an email box that existed in the webmail. The email box for this client just so happened they didn't have one of these relatively standard email boxes that existed. If they had, their system would have been completely exploited. That was the final step before this malicious actor that had executed this weapon against this target would have gained access into the client's environment. Luckily for the client, because they didn't have this mailbox, this exploit failed. But part of this really comes into good for the client. Bad on this malicious actor probably should have done better reconnaissance and found if this email box existed or not. But it was good because we were able to find that obviously they weren't fully exploited. At that point in time, they were fully patched. There was no other remediation necessary at that time. So it was good that we caught it, but it was more luck than skill, if you will, to try to deter a malicious actor from getting through on this email server. One thing I will note is obviously there are ways in which to mitigate those risks. One of them is, and then this one's a very, very powerful one. You'll see it reiterated through multiple phases here, and that's a vulnerability management program, identifying exploits and vulnerability in your environment. The only way to do that, though, is to start off by knowing your assets. You need to know your assets in order to protect your assets. Both of these, you need to be, these are the types of things that people will be using to weaponize against based on the recon. You need to protect what you have, and the only way to protect what you have is to know what you have. So vulnerability management, asset management, and then being able to act on that information. That information is going to give you is very powerful. It's going to tell you that there are exploits of vulnerabilities that exist on these assets in your environment. These are the remediation steps to take. It's important to close that out, close that gap, take those actions, because that will make sure that these types of exploits, you're not relying on a little bit of luck to make sure that these exploits are not fully executed on you.
Yeah, and you know, it's good for the customer that they had a little bit of luck that day, but ultimately we recommend doing these things by design, right? We don't want to have success by chance. We want to have success by design. So to your point, having a mature vulnerability management program, whether it's with your own IT staff, security staff, or partnering with an organization to know your assets, know where the risks are, and really identifying those so you can have a plan to remediation is the key. But ultimately, success was we were able to help that customer, guide them through that incident response process, and in the meantime, help them shore up some of their security posture that they needed based on our findings. So now that you've selected a weapon of choice, right? You have the tools to accomplish a task. How do you evade that first layer of defenses? You've done the recon, you've done the weaponization. How do you evade that first layer, Manny, and really start to get that foothold in a customer?
Absolutely. So we're jumping now into the kind of the next section in the next phase. We've done our months of planning to get all our information together, generate our weapons. Now we're getting into the delivery phase. As part of the delivery phase, the intrusion phase, we're getting into the delivery of content, of malware. Now we're looking at getting initial access. This would be successful exploitation, getting through that first layer of the onion, if you will. These could be phishing emails, very common. I think everybody would raise their hand if they've ever seen a phishing email. We get them multiple times a day, typically. And then there could be even something that is probably not as widely known, maybe domain spoofing. This would be something to say if you have a website that's publicly facing, a malactor can come in and create a like website and even register a domain with maybe 2 characters flipped or an I instead of an L, whatever the case may be, to make it look identical to your website. When that people go through it, they're obviously collecting information and data. They could be collecting that as a means of being able to kind of gather and get people to click on malicious content. And then ultimately is looking for those vulnerabilities and exploiting those vulnerabilities to get through that first layer. The other option is these are real technical components. There's also potential of a physical delivery as well. And this is something where you can utilize something as simple as a thumb drive, a little flash drive that has malicious content on it. You could always go in and you have a thumb drive that has a little label on it that says executive salaries, and then you drop it in the parking lot out front of a business. And it's very difficult for someone to pick that up, read executive salaries, and not want to plug it in. I know what it is, and I kind of want to plug it in anyway, because I want to see what's inside. And that sometimes that little bit of curiosity is something that can really be easily taken advantage of. When you click on something, again, you're launching that malicious content, you're getting through that delivery phase. You have your weapon, need to get it past that first gate. What's important is to make sure that that device, that method that you're using for delivery, the method that you're using to get that content in, needs to be able to avoid defenses. You need defensive evasion. You need to avoid endpoint protection that you have in the environment. You need to avoid firewall protection, your edge communications. You're going to be communicating in and out via this weapon that you've designed and put into the environment. So you need to be able to make sure it's going through standard, typical communication channels. And then email security. When you're sending that phishing email in, there are certain things you can do to try to deflect or make sure that kind of email doesn't get delivered. And come to think of it, I think on the next slide, Emilio, if this comes to mind, is a global marketing company.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. Actually, this phase seems to be one of the most interesting phases. My method of delivery is layer 8, and if you guys don't know what layer 8 is, it's people. So you have all the OSI layers, and layer 8 is people, the most weakest link. So I like to target people. We actually, in my previous job, I had an engagement where a customer wanted us to do a social engineering engagement. That's what it was, a social engineering engagement. They wanted us to launch a phishing campaign against their business to get an idea of what their risk was for social engineering. So they were a global marketing company, and they served Fortune 100 companies. And at the time, they were actually going through an acquisition. So we were doing our recon, doing our due diligence, and we came across the merger, and they were being acquired, I believe, if I remember correctly. And so what we had ended up doing was we spoofed the acquiring company's email signature, and wrote up this whole basically an email that said, hey, we need you guys to change your password, click on this link, this is to set up your new account, right? Before launching the campaign, we allowed them to review the email that we were going to send, and they told us that we couldn't do it because it was too good, and everybody was gonna fall for it. So they didn't allow us to do that because they already knew they would fail. Come to find out, though, the actual phishing campaign that we did launch, we were still able to get people to click on the link and actually authorize their MFA for their email box. So we were able to press the brakes on the past email that would have caught everybody, but bad guys aren't going to do that, right? They're going to send that email, they're going to catch everybody, and it's going to be up to things like your email security to catch domain spoofing and catch malicious links and catch any kind of malware that's trying to be transferred in email, whether if that's the form that's being used. But people are the weakest link, right? So this goes back to the conversation about training and cybersecurity awareness, right? Your weakest links. Looking at the screen now, you can see this is an example of a phishing link, right? So when we talk about education and awareness, we're going to be able to look at stuff like the headers, look for typos. If you hover over links, does it go where it really says it's going to go? Check with your IT team. Raise your hand and get an adult, right? If you're not sure. But this also goes back to paying attention to your alerting systems, right? If you do have security controls in place, are you actually reviewing the contents? Or do you have a SOC? Are you actioning on the alerts? You don't want to get stagnant, and you want to make sure that you're continuously improving these systems to catch more of these sophisticated attacks, because it's going to work. We know it does. Like Manny said, it's in our inboxes every day, right? We see these things.
That's right. So to equate this to like an old cartoon of where you'd see, the cartoon characters doing a little bit of breaking and entering, right? You've dug your tunnel under the building. Now you've broken through the floor. You've popped your head inside. How do you now navigate and discover where the treasures are? How do you start to get that lay of the land, right? You've dug the tunnel. You're inside the four walls. Now what? Emilio, if you can kick that off.
Yep. I keep going there. So again, I want to reiterate, the last step, this step, and this following step are all happening within seconds. They're all kind of glued together, right? So we deliver, and then the exploitation occurs, right? So that means that either somebody has clicked that link, and then when that link is clicked, what happens, right? So not to get too technical, but from the point where you click a link on your machine and it runs, it's going to run some kind of software, some not good software, malicious software. This is either going to fully exploit a vulnerability on your machine. It's going to do stuff like try to hide itself. It's going to bury itself in normal processes, normal traffic. It's gonna do a little bit of triage. It's gonna look to see if there are other computers connected here. What does the network look like? It's gonna try to paint a picture. It's all automated, right? It's gonna do all of these things that I would do if I was on your computer, right? So I'm gonna customize it. We go back to the weaponization phase and the recon phase, right? If we've done our due diligence, we know what we need to look for once we get past the defenses. So that's what this exploitation phase, right? It's pretty much, we're in an intrusion phase where we're not really on your network yet, but we're building all the pieces to get on your network. The other thing I wanted to mention is all of these tools that we're mentioning in all of these phases, they're all open source tools. They're all free. They're not hard to use. It doesn't really take, I can teach most of you guys before the end of the day how to use some of the tools we're going to use, right? They're pre-custom, pre-built by people who are way smarter than us, to basically click and go, plug and play, right? And some of these tools take advantage of the native operating system tools. So the tools you have in Windows that are used for administrative purposes that you would think would be used for good can also be used for bad. So that's what we're doing during this exploitation phase, right? We're running malicious code to take advantage of some of the things that are already on the operating system for our own purposes. And actually, Manny has a cool story about how we actually were able to exploit or compromise an entire network from a parking lot. Manny, is that right?
Yeah, it was definitely from a parking lot. So this is a good one. So we had an engineering firm that we were working with, and we were taking a look at, obviously, Wi-Fi. Every organization has Wi-Fi these days, right? So we come in, we connect wirelessly, we get on the network, we're off and running and checking our emails and doing our daily activities. Typically, in a lot of organizations, you'll have a guest network and you'll have a corporate network. So if you have visitors, throw them on the guest network. If you're an employee of the organization, go on to the corporate network. And the two should never intertwine. Unfortunately, sometimes they intertwine. So we had an example of an organization where their guest network, once you were authenticated as a guest, you also had access to corporate assets as well. So obviously that was a huge threat vector. We were able to pull up into the parking lot, get on the guest Wi-Fi. We were able to crack that and able to get on the guest Wi-Fi with the guest password without having to ask for it. And then from there, we had full access into the corporate environment. From there, all of the tools, that's our delivery method. And then we have our laptop decked out with all the malware we could want, our fully weaponized toolbox ready to go. One of the things I wanted to,
hey, Manny,
please.
Manny, was that Wi-Fi address just made available? It wasn't shielded or anything?
Absolutely.
And
so
do people know you should do that?
So what happens with Wi-Fi is that it'll have some level of a broadcast. So even Wi-Fi's that don't broadcast their names, it's still floating. And the major difference between plugging in a device point to point and having it over a physical wire versus over Wi-Fi is over a wire between two endpoints, very difficult to see what's going on. Over Wi-Fi, you're in the open air. And what I wanted to do is, if switching over to the next slide, I want to show you an example of what we can do with that open air information.
Hey,
So
Manny, did anybody stop you in the parking lot?
No, why would they stop me in the parking lot? I'm just parked out there with everyone else. So what we have is this is from our attack machine. On the left-hand side, we have two rows here. We have our router, our wireless access point, something like you have at home or have at the office. And on the bottom, you have two devices communicating, the access point and like your cell phone or laptop, something connecting wirelessly. So what we're doing on the left is we're monitoring that information. On the right-hand side, what we're doing is we're telling that router, that access point, you know what, this device, I want you to de-authenticate it. I want you to drop it off the network. And what happens is with all wireless devices, you know, as you walk around your house, or maybe you don't know, is that it's constantly dropping and reconnecting based on if it can find the access point or not, or it has to jump from point A to point B. So the systems are designed to automatically re-authenticate. Well, we're monitoring that handshake. It's open air. We can read it just like anything else. And if you notice where it's highlighted in white, we can see here it says WPA handshake. That means we captured that initial communication handshake. Now it's encrypted, and I'll throw up air quotes, encrypted, but that encryption contains the password to log into that wireless access point. The type of technology they used required one password, as you typically would have with a guest network. You log in with one password. And what that allows us to do is take that information. Now we can take it offline and we can crack it. By cracking it, we take it, that encrypted password, and we're able to decrypt it and get it in plain text. From there, and in this case, for the instance that we had, it took about, I think the way I described it to you guys when we talked about it was that it took me longer to type in the commands to crack it than the time it took to crack it. So we had the password in seconds and was able to authenticate in and have full access from the parking lot into the organization.
That's a great story. I mean, honestly, it shows how the intersection between physical presence, Wi-Fi networks, and then the tools in the toolbox of a hacker can accomplish a goal. And again, you know, as I hear these stories, I always thank God that we're the good guys, right? And we're not the malactors doing this, because ultimately, at the end of the day, you know, our goal is to make sure we're leaving our customers better than we found them. So we go back to the customer and help them harden their Wi-Fi and put controls in place to stop these type of things from happening. So, but just an incredible story to show that. So, I mean, at this point, you have the lay of the land, right? You have some access, you have visibility into what you're working with. At that point, what's your goal as a hacker, right? You've decrypted a password, you've got access into a network, you really peeled back that first layer of the onion, and you have visibility into the inside. Now what?
Yeah, so kind of piggybacking off of that last exploitation phase, you know, in the same matter of seconds, right? We've delivered our malware, we've breached your defenses, we've exploited a machine to basically give us kind of access that we'd like, and at the same time, in the last instance, we're going to be installing our method of communication, right? So we're going to be installing either our malware or our Trojan that's going to set up the ability for us to actually connect to the machine, right? The compromised machine. So at this point, we've fully exploited any vulnerabilities that's on the endpoint. We've installed our code, we've installed additional tools, and our intent is to establish communication back to ourselves, right? So that we can actually get our hands on keyboard. So we're talking about persistence in your organization. We're past your security, we're in the house, and we're kind of setting up all type of bugs so that we can get ready to make our call back home. Manny, I'm going to kick it over to you. If you want to kind of go through a good story of what can be installed in an environment. I think you had a story about a high-end hospitality company in California. We did incident response story.
Absolutely, and this one is unfortunate. I'll put it that way, and we'll see in a minute. So it was a high-end hospitality company. They had previously been a victim months prior to a ransomware attack. And they had gone through where the malactor had installed malware across the organization. And as part of their initial remediation back on that initial infection, they recovered from the ransomware attack. However, when these installations are taking place, they tend to go across as far and wide in the organization as possible. They want to maintain persistence. That's our objective. We're not connecting and infecting one system. We want to affect all systems. So what happened is when this organization, about 6 or 8 months later, the residual of that, they were hit again by a ransomware attack. And this was something that happened. It was during during a very high point in the season for the hospitality. They lost a lot of capital. Unfortunately, the money that they lost during that was unfortunate. But essentially, what happened was it really comes back to proper incident response, because this installation process, as a hacker, we're trying to get every single endpoint we can, when we're not going to always divulge all the different locations in which we have something. So if we're launching a ransomware attack, we may launch it against key components in the systems, but also on the side is maintain persistence elsewhere. Because while we're raising an alarm with one hand, we're going to be hiding with the other, because we know when we raise an alarm, we're going to get spotted, something's going to happen, it's going to get pulled out. We need to maintain persistence elsewhere. So that's hugely important in an incident response, is that gets captured. I wanted to switch over real quick to the next slide, because this is something I think that really puts into perspective. What we have here is an example of a ransomware attack. So this was an older attack called WannaCry. And what's going to happen on this video, it doesn't look like it's playing, but there is a file on the machine itself. When it executes, There we go. All right. Mouse is moving. When we execute this file, now this is something that obviously you're executing for demo purposes. This could come across on an email, could be a click on a link, could be waiting for something to happen. But you can see file's been clicked, a lot's happening. It's already encrypted. Did you blink? Because you may have missed it. The background screen's already changed. You have a pop-up. It's time to pay the ransom. That's how quickly a ransomware attack can execute on an endpoint. And this is the last thing we want to walk into at any point during the day, is to see something like this on our desktop. And it's something that can happen so quickly, easily happen behind the scenes. This is the type of thing that is nightmare fuel, I think, for most ID departments, is to see something like this spread across an environment. Now, there are a lot of roadblocks that we can put in place to keep this from happening. Do want to note, while ransomware is something that we hear a lot of, and there's a lot going on to it, it's utilizing a lot of weaponized techniques in order to get this far. This isn't something that's just you're going to stumble upon it and click on it. This is something that someone is using old exploits. They're using old vulnerabilities. They're using old methods to propagate across your network. So if you're going through and you have a strong vulnerability management system, if you're patching your systems, if you're implementing MFA, if you have strong passwords, you're utilizing your email security, your modern endpoint protection, it sounds like a lot. It's your general overall security hygiene. You need to make sure if those are in place, this ransomware doesn't have an opportunity to get on your system. It doesn't have an opportunity to execute. The important thing is with all those systems, there's going to be a lot of information, a lot of alerts that come out of it. Having a team or a group of people that can react to those alerts, action those alerts, are going to be a key as well. Because it's one thing to put something in place, it's another thing to action those items when they arise, so that this doesn't happen.
Right, and it's unfortunate, Manny. I mean, double ransomware is an epidemic now, right? Organizations who get hit with ransomware once, 6 to 8 months later, a year later, they get hit a second time. This is becoming an epidemic. And honestly, it shows that network of cyber criminals that are out there, because that first ransomware actor who was able to gain ransom and make some money off of that victim may have sold that persistence to another threat actor, and then 8 months later, they're hit again, right? So it shows the cartels, it shows the networks, it shows that access for sale is happening. But double ransomware is an epidemic. It was unfortunate for this customer. And luckily, I mean, at the end of the day, coming in on that second wave, I think we were successful in helping them through an incident response activity that would prove it, will shore up their organization so it doesn't happen again. So at this point, bugs have been planted, right? Especially in that previous example, you've run ransomware successfully and it's installed. Now it's game time, right? Now it's time for where you're going to actually achieve the outcome that you have, whether it's make that ransomware spread throughout the entire organization, or maybe even some more malicious activities. So Emilio, let's talk about the next phase that you're in once you've successfully planted all these bugs and have been able to show exploits within an organization.
Yep. So at this point, we consider this the active breach phase, right? So your defenses have been totally breached. You might have some awareness that something's going on in your network. You might be getting phone calls. Sometimes it could end with the ransomware attack, right? That could be the goal. But other times, we like to stay very quiet, right? So once we've exploited the machine and we've installed our malware, now we're going to be able to actually have hands on the keyboard, right? So now, me personally, sitting in my mom's basement, I'm going to be able to communicate with your whatever machine's compromised, whether it's somebody's endpoint or server or any kind of website you have being hosted out there on the internet, right? So we call this our command and control phase, right? So we're talking about how am I going to establish communication from my computer to the compromised system, right? We can do it quietly, we can do it noisily, we can blend in with your business traffic, we can stand out, we can exfiltrate data over DNS, or we can to upload it to a Google Drive, right? So depending on which way we want to kind of manage our communication, this is where our mind is. This is what we're thinking about. Jay, can you go over to the next slide? I want to just show an example about how easy it is to get from exploitation to command and control, right? So on the left side here, we have a one-line code of an exploit, right? This is the exploit that it's preloaded. It's a one-line code. It's not that difficult. On the right side, we have what we have. We're gonna have access to your machine, so you can see command shell session 2 open. So this is your compromised machine on the right side. On the left side, I'm running the exploit from my house, right? So this is how easy it is to get from delivery, exploitation, installation, all the way to command and control. So once the exploit runs, you can see here on the right side, we have access to a Windows machine, right? On the left side is a Kali machine. So this is how fast it can happen, right? So what should really scare you here is 2 window panes, 1 line of code, compromised machine.
Yep. And just a little bit of background. I mean, this is a vulnerability that is recent. It's a
Brand new.
newly exploited vulnerability that came out recently, and it's called Print Nightmare. It creates the printer from hell, right? Which ultimately we refer to. And that creates persistence and command and control into your network. That quick, I don't know, 15-second clip of how Manny and Emilio would leverage this vulnerability is exactly how they get command and control.
Yep. And I would just pre-package this and send it to an email.
Yep. So now
yes.
let's hit final objective, right? I mean,
Yep.
At this point, you're hitting that final objective. You've gone through command and control. You have persistence where you can constantly communicate to a compromised machine within a network. Let's go after that final objective. What is it?
Yeah. So final objective, I want to command everything in your network, right? So I'm going to move around laterally. I'm going to start compromising other machines. I'm going to start compromising your routers, your switches, all kind of systems, whatever services you're running, right? Cloud and on-prem, right? I'm going to start covering my tracks. I'm going to start gathering credentials and expanding my access, third parties, right, into your vendors' networks, all kind of sorts of mess, right? This is kind of where we start to go crazy. Manny is really good at this part. He's had, like he said, he's had over 20 years of experience in all kind of businesses and industry, right? He knows how to hit you where it hurts. When we talk about crown jewels, he knows all of them. Manny, do you want to give some of your crazy stories about how you destroyed networks from the bottom up?
Oh, no, absolutely. After a setup like that, I'm not sure if I should be blurring my face. No, I mean, this is something too. These last 2 steps: command and control, and action on objectives. Everything else, we talk about reconnaissance. That takes months. It's a lot of work getting up to it. We talk about the active exploitation phase. It takes seconds. We get in command and control. Typically, we're in there, or can be in there as a malicious actor. We're in there for months, because we're going and we're scouring and looking for all the nooks and crannies of all the intellectual property that you may have in your organization. We're looking for stuff that's going to impact your business. Number one, we want to understand what's going to hurt. Where is your business going? What kind of information? What vertical are you in? Are you financial? Are you infrastructure? Are you manufacturing? What's your intellectual property? Where does it exist? We want to find ways to best interrupt and or destroy services, because those are the items that we can hold against a target. Those are the types of things you can ransom off. We're looking for access, like Emilio said, access to third parties. Again, like we talked about earlier, you may not be the ultimate target. Your ultimate target may be a partnership that you have with a much larger organization. So access to those third parties, access to your customers, pulling in data. And one of the things that I know is really prevalent right now is all about kind of collecting data pre-ransomware, and that's obviously still a major component. But another thing that happens behind the scenes, and I think is even scarier, is data manipulation. As a malactor with access in your environment, you could be in there manipulating results and manipulating data over a course of several months, to the point where if you try to revert back, how far back do you go? When do you know this manipulation actually started and took place? And how would that manipulation affect your overall record keeping and ability to conduct business? Account number changes, contact information. And then ultimately is about collecting and exfiltrating that data, because ransomware attacks are twofold. They're going to take that data, send it off site, and they're holding their data ransom, and they're holding everything encrypted ransom. And then there's even third and fourth option, which is they can now, with access, provide denial of service attacks against your environment, or go into a fourth phase where they could actually potentially, with those contacts, reach out to your third parties, reach out to your clients and say, hey, by the way, I got your information from company X, and they didn't want to do business with me, so I have your information. Maybe you want to pay me to not spread this information.
And that's a big issue, folks. I mean, the whole reputational risk associated with this is, in addition to monetary costs, reputational risk, I still contend is equal to anything else.
Yeah, 100%. So Manny, tethering into that quickly based on time, right? Let's tell the story, because I think it's super impactful, about an airport authority that we had a project with, and
Absolutely.
how we were able to identify some of their vulnerabilities and what that equated to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. With an airport, it was an airport authority, 5 unique airports, one of the airports being a major international airport. The amount of information that we were able to gather or get access to was almost amazing. Video and audio, live video, live audio. We had actually video clips and audio clips of content that was being saved for litigation. We had access to passport information, access to board of directors, PII, personal identifiable information, both pre and current, access to TSA databases, access to vehicle information about people that were parking at the airport, license plates, names, vehicle identification numbers, background checks. The amount of information was massive. In these really mitigation and roadblocks associated with really mitigating this risk, a lot of it comes down to things like zero trust architecture, multi-factor authentication, and education. Overall, it's people, it's process, and it's technology. And we need to combine all three. And it's something that we hope that someday we get the opportunity to help your organization in that process.
Thanks, gentlemen. I mean, these stories are enlightening, and honestly, the reason why we want to go down the path of storytelling is because they're real world examples of our superhero hackers helping organizations mitigate these risks before the bad guys get eyeballs on those risks and do something very harmful. But just know, with all of this, we know it's scary. We know it's something that may seem unaccomplishable, but honestly, there's hope, right? Maturing cybersecurity posture, it's a journey. It takes a village. We have folks like Manny and Emilio who are skilled in helping organizations tighten their security posture. We have folks like myself and Dan who can help you from a framework and a best practice and a process perspective, leveraging things like NIST, CSF, GRC capabilities, governance, risk, and compliance capabilities. So you can see here really quickly, leveraging NIST is a good start for many organizations. Understanding your business, right? Whether you're a financial institution, a healthcare organization, if you're a DoD contractor and need CMMC assistance, we can help you with the regulatory side, the governance side, the compliance side, because all of these are part of a bigger program. You've heard it from, and I said it earlier, from Secretary Mayorkas. It's an imperative. It's a must do. It's not a should, it's a shall, right? So no action is still an action, and we want to help our clients take action on this and start that journey, start that process. Then having experts who can do phases like these, the penetration testing, vulnerability assessments, network security assessments. It's extremely important to assess your current state, look at where you are today, and create a remediation plan for the future, and constantly look at your posture and your maturity so that you're always looking at getting a more secure security posture for your organization. And then comes the technologies, right? It's the technologies that will help protect your data, your applications, your infrastructure, your network, leveraging things like identity and device management, policies that we can properly give access to the places that those devices and those identities deserve to have access, nonetheless, right? So really taking that holistic look. But it's the people, it's the processes and the frameworks, and it's the technologies combined that are going to create that success story for you. It's not set it and forget it. Leverage partners, leverage knowledge-based organizations that you can partner with. Talk to KLR, talk to Envision. We can help you start that path or continue down the path to help mature your organization. But that's important to have that good business partner as well, because again, it takes a village to get this done. Security-focused business partner that's side by side with you on that journey, who knows your business, who knows your risk appetite, and can continuously assess your posture and really build those security and business risk strategies. So with that said, I hope these were value add stories. I know in some instances I got to chill and I'm hearing them again. But now I'm going to kick it over to Jeremy and to Dan to kind of close out the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we're coming up on time, but this is such an important topic that I think you can all give us hopefully a few more minutes. Dan, please encapsulate this for me. Put a bow on this.
Well, I think the gentleman, I thought I heard Emilio's mother calling from upstairs, so he needs to get out of the basement. But in all seriousness, folks, serious topic. It was very interesting to see how it actually works. And if nothing else, we just hope that you take pause at what you heard. In our next session, which Jeremy will cap off this presentation with, we're going to drill into some of the preventive measures you can take. So as Jason said, all hope is not lost. We'll drill into how you can develop best practices to that. But with that, thank you so much for attending today's session. Hopefully you got something out of it. Our contact information is everywhere, and have a great day.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much, Dan, and thank you everyone as well. As Dan said, we do have another session planned. That is on Thursday, October 28th. The title for that session is Planning Your Prevention Strategy. You can register using the link that you see on the screen right now. We do have a few more minutes. If anyone has any questions, you can please hit us up in the chat. I did get one during the session, Jason, that I'm gonna kick over to you. Actually, I got a couple of them. But one of them I think is a good start. And it's, obviously this is a complex topic. We went over a lot there. Where does someone start? If an organization heard this presentation and they're like, I need to know what to do next. What is the next step? What would you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, we hear that a lot. And honestly, the best way to get to the future state of your security posture is let's level set, get a baseline on what that current state is. Partner with an organization like Envision and KLR. We can come in and do a current state assessment of an organization's posture, really give you the gaps and vulnerabilities and threat vectors and the business risks that we see through those assessments to help guide you to that future state. And not only are we performing an assessment or an audit of your organization, the value add is that we're gonna bring to the table remediation strategies, how you fix those vulnerabilities and those threat vectors, and we're gonna rank them by risk for you. We're gonna look at your organization, we're gonna look at your risk appetite, and we're gonna look at your vertical, and we're gonna say, here's step by step in order of priority, every remediation step that you need to take from now until however long that roadmap goes, that journey, right? It may be, a lot of vulnerabilities you can fix in a quarter, and some of it may be a plan going on to next fiscal year. And then really at that point, it's the continuous improvement working with us. So that's important to build that roadmap. You really need to understand your current state in order to get to the future state.
So step one, if you need to get started, talk to KLR, talk to Envision. We'll help you make this complex and manageable.
And Jeremy, Manny put it best. You can't protect what you don't know you have, right? So the first thing is to figure out what the heck I need to protect and where is it, and then everything goes off of that. So absolutely echo what Jason has said.
Absolutely, Dan. That's perfect. Hey, so Manny and Emilio, interesting question that we got. When you guys are performing tests for security, because you're ethical hackers, right? You're not trying to take people down for all of the reasons that the cyber criminals are. But the question is, when you're actually attacking these systems, is there really business interruption? I mean, you're using the same methods that a cyber criminal would. How do you prevent the business from actually crumbling while you're doing this?
Yeah, so we do a lot of testing, in-house testing. We have a lab that we have built up to test some of the tools, make sure we have customized scannings, right? We do have, you know, before we start our engagements, we have a take-in sheet where we ask you a couple of questions to kind of get an understanding of what you have out there. If you know, if you have SCADA devices, you know, we know not to run certain scans, right? We've tested this, trial and error, right? So in the past, you know, things do happen, but you know, we work together closely to kind of identify any of the problems. You know, if we're doing a vulnerability scan of your outside infrastructure and your services go down, we treat that like a vulnerability. We treat that as something that needs to be remediated. But you know, we do our due diligence and we try very hard not to interrupt your business. That's one of our mottos.
And something to note is that when we're going through the process itself, there are going to be exploits available that are specifically about service disruption. We'll note that, we bring it to the forefront, we assign risk associated with that, we bring it on the reports, but we do not execute on it. Those are the types of things that we're going to go and find, we're going to help uncover, and to say, look, if we were a real bad guy, we could take your business down with this type of exploit that you have available to you. So we raise awareness without obviously running it against the business. It all comes down to, and we always go by the motto of do no harm. We're going in to uncover, and our objective is that you should never know we're there. That's our overall objective.
And to add to that, there's been plenty of times where we've had engagements where we've had to stop and kind of raise our hand and let the client know that there's something really, really bad going on that you need to address right now. So we'll do that as well.
Yeah, and the moral of the story at the highest level is, as we're building the engagement, we're designing scope and we're building rules of engagement, right? So ultimately, those rules of engagement go through every single phase of that attack process that you just saw. And then we identify certain areas that are sensitive. And Emilio had mentioned, you know, sometimes there is business disruption because we want to prove something out, but we'll work with the customer and say, at what time would you like this to happen if you would like this to happen, right? Because sometimes they want us to be able to prove that out to test their business continuity planning. So we'll say, on a Saturday morning is the best time to go after this target, because now we can prove out their business continuity plan and we're timing it, right? We're scheduling those type of interruptions. So it all depends on the appetite of the customer, how deep they want us to go in the testing, and how far they want us to go as far as knock on the door, walk in the door, or actually grab that wallet off of the table, right? So we plan all of that in advance.
Got another question that just came in, guys, if you have a few more minutes.
Absolutely.
It says, do vulnerabilities extend to employees' home networks? What do you recommend for keeping home networks secure? Obviously, very pertinent with the distributed workforce that so many organizations are working under these days. So home networks, what are your thoughts on those?
Who wants to jump on that?
This is really going to come up when it comes into scope, when we have that initial discussion. So it really comes down to the determination if we have the latitude to involve or go to that depth. Now, we're usually going to endpoint. So we'll go to the endpoint regardless of location, and having that in scope allows us that ability to do that. Then we will traverse down that path. However, we will try to have limitations and barriers associated with that. A lot of times, the way we'll liken it to is if we're going in let's say it's related to a third-party access. We'll go up to the door, peek through the window and say, look, we can get in, but we're not going there. And that is typically where we can kind of draw that line of where the responsibility, and that's where our scope really determines where that line should be drawn.
Yeah, I think, and this is just my perception of the question, is how do we plan to protect from any vulnerabilities that may be in a home network? The other side of that, right? There's, you know, we talked a little bit earlier about zero trust, right? So zero trust is a methodology, and you hear a lot of manufacturers talking about it, but zero trust is the modern day architecture or framework that you can use, leveraging a lot of best practices that we've built over the course of years and years and years of doing cybersecurity protection. But it focuses on identity and device. So if you have a home PC that's connecting into your network and you have zero trust capabilities enabled, whether it's through your Office 365 portal, through your SASE implementation, which is like your firewall and your infrastructure management, you have that zero trust. It's looking at the person's identity and making sure they can pass go in order to get on to their next phase. other things like network access control that will actually look at the person's PC and say, your antivirus is not up to date, right? You're not fully patched. We're not allowing you into the network until you download these patches and update your antivirus or your endpoint protection, and then you can pass go. So it's a lot of those checks and balances that we can put in from a technical controls perspective that will take a look at that device, assess it, allow it to the next phase, take a look at that identity, make sure you're supposed to get to where you're asking to go to, and then allow it to pass go if it meets that criteria. So there are those controls in place.
I would just add to that, ideally, it's a company-owned asset that I'm working on remotely, right? Best case scenario, I'm not working off of a home computer. And then if it's physically possible and it's cost effective, set up a separate network so that that laptop is going into the company only and is not being, it's not in the haze of the overall home environment and all the IoTs. But there's a cost to every control. And that goes back to taking the sort of the lay of the land of the situation and what your risks are.
100%. And Dan, to that point, just to kind of close out on that, that's where we would come in and work with you on the best strategy to fit your organization and the appetite of the organization. We look at the risk factors, we look at the financials it'll take to implement, and then we make good decisions on controls or compensating controls that we can put into play for your organization to meet all those needs. Every organization's their own fingerprint, they're different. They have different risk tolerance and different financial mechanisms and different cultures. So we work with that. We work with you as a business to make the best decision for your organization and to protect your data and your people.
Excellent. Well, thank you all very much. Dan, Jason, Manny, and Emilio, thank you very much for your time. Thank you to everyone that joined us for this presentation. We hope that it was enlightening. We hope that it allowed you to see some of the scope of what we're working against and how these superheroes that you see on screen are here to protect you. Once again, Thursday, October 28th, our next session. We hope to see you then. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.